Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss pre-market video for Thursday, September 12th, 2024. I'm Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Happy Thursday, everyone. Core PPI and PPI data has just come out in addition to initial jobless claims. A little hotter than expected across the board, 0.3% versus 0.2% forecast for core PPI. PPI month over month coming in at 0.2% versus a 0.1% estimate, and initial jobless claims coming in at 230K versus a 227K estimate. Right now, the initial reaction is a bit of a push to the upside and then a drop back down toward intraday VWAP. Now, if you look at the previous session, a tremendous recovery off the lows of the day. What we were looking for yesterday was perhaps a rejection at the highs and a drop for an outside day down. Mentioned any failure through 54.50 would open up quite a bit more downside, and it played out in big fashion, 95.5 points to the downside. And then on the lows, this market turned around and proceeded to rally about 5 straight hours to the upside, getting a huge move off the lows of the day. Yesterday's was a huge high range day. It was a buy G squat, as you can see here by the green coloration of the candle, and that would tend to be a huge day one rejection and a continuation to the upside. We've seen some of these events this year, and especially after selling pressure, a day like this, for example, or a day like this, and the net result over the following 1 to 2 weeks, 3 weeks tends to be to the upside. So it's a huge day yesterday. Now, do we get a bit of compression, maybe a bit of a fade after trend day? Perhaps, but I would say that the tendency here wouldn't be for price to rotate as deep as the previous session's midpoint. That might be too far down if you're a bull, but any pullback could still be seen as a buying opportunity for a continuation up as this market looks to build on yesterday's strong rejection. So right now, sideways to up could be in play. Any early pullback again could be seen as an opportunity for bulls to defend and rotate this thing back up over the following days and perhaps even into the next couple of weeks. So right now, keeping an eye on the previous session's high, rejection here, and you're working your way back down a bit. Again, perhaps not as low as the previous session's midpoint. That midpoint right there is 89.75. That might be a bit too far down, but if we do get to that level, it could begin to develop into a rejection or a failure of this massive rejection day. So again, bulls want a more shallow pullback to defend for a continuation up. If we look at the NQ, another similar reaction in the previous session, big time move off the lows of the day. It was an outside day down, and then price turned around and proceeded to rally for an outside day up and then some. Another massive high range day, a huge rejection, especially off of the developing year-to-date VWAP, and just a huge move to the upside. So again, while we could see a little bit of sideways or perhaps even a backfill here, you wouldn't necessarily want price to drop as deep as the previous session's midpoint. That might be too far down. We could get down into the 19.1s, and that could provide an opportunity for bulls to defend for a checkmark continuation to the upside and perhaps a full-on recovery back toward recent highs in the 20,000 zone. So again, any pullback toward 19K could provide a bounce of about 1,000 points or more over the following 1 to 2 weeks, especially if bulls can defend after this massive rejection. If we take a look at crude oil, this one's up right now, 1% at the moment, but still downtrending in a big way. Still downtrending. You can see the overhead resistance here by way of the 8-period pivot-based EMA. That continues to show as major resistance. This market continues to hold below 70, below the 72 breakdown point, and is still yet to reach the final downside target zone of 64. As we mentioned, there's a cluster of support levels down here by way of the previous year's low, which is 63.64. You have the 64 key range or key market structure level, and then the key range 100% target is 64.34. So a cluster of support levels here. This pullback could lead to a selling opportunity to complete that move into that zone of support. Keep an eye on the previous session's high, 68 here, a rejection there, and you're opening up some downside back into yesterday's range. So again, any pullback could still be seen as a selling opportunity as this market completes the move into 64s. Once we see 64 or prices just below it, that could provide an opportunity for a reaction rally off of that level back up, perhaps as high as 72, maybe even higher. So we could be coming to the end of the line of the downside here, especially once those 64s are reached. Looking at gold futures, this one right now up about 0.5% right now, still sideways, hugging the flat line of 25.40. About a month's worth of sideways up here at these highs. I mentioned before that any pullback could still be seen as a buying opportunity for an eventual upside break and continuation toward 2600. Now the YM here is mostly flat right now. It did react perhaps the most out of the equity futures here with a sharp rally or a sharp push higher on CPI, or rather PPI data, and then a big reaction back down. 41,100 is the high. That's been about where resistance has been over the last week of trading, and now we are now back below the previous session's high barely. So it's putting in an early strong high. Now the previous session was a tremendous reaction. We mentioned yesterday morning that we likely see a follow through into the previous month's midpoint. It got there yesterday and then springboarded higher off that level. Nearly got the 40,000 midpoint here of the key range. We mentioned that that zone was going to be an area of support, or at least a target to reach. It nearly got that level and then rallied tremendously. So this is a huge rejection, and again falls in line with some of the rejections we've seen this year. If you look at something like this, something like that, something like this one, and now this one, each of those developed after selling pressure and eventually led to big continuations to the upside over a multiple week period. So while we could see a little bit more laziness here, overall this thing could be flowing higher, at least later into the month. So right now, keeping an eye on the previous session's high price, the rejection there, and you're working your way back toward the previous session's midpoint. Again, if you're a bull, you don't necessarily want price to drop that deep, because any push into that level or beyond that level could begin to break this bullish rejection. Looking at Bitcoin here with a failed new low in the previous session, failed new low, squat bar as well. Today coming in with a bit of a failed high and back into the range. This market continues to look very heavy, as I've mentioned, but if this higher low, this failed new low, begins to work out, it could open up a little bit of a recovery effort back towards 62, maybe even as high as 65K. Again, still in a rounded top behavior, still in a lower high market, and any push through the previous session's midpoint could begin to really weigh heavily on this previous session's rejection. So again, bulls want to keep price above that midpoint here. That's 56,928. You start to push through that and you open up some more downside. Likewise in ETH here, ETH a little bit lower right now against what we've seen here out of Bitcoin. This one is currently trading right near the previous session's midpoint. Previous session's midpoint 23.45 half, and right now we're at 23.45. So we are right below that previous session's midpoint, and you continue to see the overhead resistance by way of the bearish Pima trigger zone, the 8-period average. You see this big time downtrending price action. So again, this market continues to remain quite heavy. and we're still looking for that massive rejection that will turn us around and rally this thing to the upside. Until then, still kind of trending downward for crypto. All right, that is it for now. We'll see how this develops here heading into the rest of the session. Good luck, trade well, and I'll see you in the trading room. Take care.